the first motivation was that as when I studied art history, I realized that wood was not was not deeply taken care of. Before my studies, I did an apprenticeship in German woodworking,
yes.
And so I learned much about wood, and I realized that there was not much said about, or was not so deeply developed the knowledge on wood in art history. So I just decided to do. That was for my master thesis. I was already working on Japanese wood species, just that people know more about the wood species. And then I realized it was not deep enough, and I did a PhD also on Japanese traditional woodworking. I interviewed the Japanese craftsmen, and then I published at the end. I published my work because I want that this knowledge is furthered on, like you also want to further on the knowledge on all the wood, knowledge on wood. This knowledge is going to be lost if we don't take care of it and make it known. And so if people know about it, then they will appreciate it and will try to preserve it. But if they don't know it, they will not care for it. Of course, also wood-related craftsmen, and also art historians, archaeologists, ethnobotanists, to anybody. But it's also for the general public, because this covers several areas. So it's a little bit art history related, but also Japanese studies related. But Japanese studies people, they are not so much aware about woodworking, but it's a general public, but also several specific publics. No, because I did. I myself, I'm a craftsman,
Yes.
so I know all these words. Of course, in German, I learned. I was in Germany when I learned it, and so I know what they are talking about. So therefore, I also decided to do these interviews with the craftsmen, because this is a word I know, and I'm familiar with, and it's easier for me to learn such words, to become familiar with such terms than other areas like economy. So the words would be not so easy for me to learn than wood related. That was only me. When my professor, I was at Kyoto University.
Yes.
I did my research at Kyoto University, but the institution where I was affiliated doing my PhD, that was in France, the National Museum of Natural History.
Yes.
I also had a professor there that was a professor of ethnobotany.
Yeah.
So ethnobotany, human-plant relationship. So the plant is the tree, and the human is the Japanese craftsman. Great. They were very happy to share their knowledge. And I'm still friends with many of them. They are happy to share. And now, I think nowadays, they are happy if there's somebody they can pass on their knowledge. I mean, this is not the times have changed.
According to your observation,
yes,
the young people, are they receiving the craftsman skill well?
Yeah, if there are some, yes, but there are fewer and fewer. There are not so many. It's not easy to make your living with traditional woodworking.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
But I thought people have come to be more aware of their national treasure. like you mentioned in the book, the Japanese government have passed a National Treasure Protection Act in the 50s. Yeah, I guess that's something general.
Yeah, that's for art related. No, that's general, but specific to do your own, to make a living with traditional woodworking. This is objectively not so easy. You don't earn so much money if you do traditional woodworking, and so many people. But there are some young people who try, but fewer and fewer. The Japanese government is doing a little bit of it. If I talk with the craftsmen, they say, yeah, some don't like that the government interferes, but at the other side, I think compared to China, for example, the Japanese government has this law protecting the crafts, the traditional crafts, and promoting it. They maybe are not perfect in doing it, but at least they do it. And so I think I talk about it in my book. And so this is also something I want to be known. Yeah. Also encourage other governments in other countries to be aware of this knowledge. And so therefore I used also Japanese woodworking to focus my research on, and the Japanese wood species. But like in Japan and in China, the number of wood species is quite large, so it is interesting. And especially in Japan, it comes that also the government is protecting this field, and the Japanese by themselves are also interested in wood. They call themselves a culture of wood. So the people are interested. And I saw it last year. I published, my book was promoted in the Japanese newspaper, in the Nikkei Shimbun. And this had a great impact. I was so astonished. And 100 people bought this book. Also, it is in English, and the Japanese people bought this book. I was really touched by that. You see that in Japan there's a real awareness and openness. Yes, it's the treasure, national treasure. They in specific fields, in each field, they look for the best craftsman, and he's considered as a national treasure. The person is a national treasure. Yes, but this is just one craftsman, but okay, there is some movement or some activity in this direction. So. It is also, it makes the craft world more visible for the people, yes. Hinoki is one of the most well-known is a very nice wood in Japan, the Hinoki cypress. Japanese cypress. The Latin name is Kamae cyparis obtusa, and in Japanese it's Hinoki. Yes. Then you have I mentioned the example that in the reconstruction of a temple in Nara, the Yakushiji, they reconstructed one entire building, and they needed Hinoki. Yeah. So they didn't have enough Hinoki in Japan, so they went to Taiwan. And they found there was forests with large timber trees. Yeah. So they used 2 kinds of Hinoki from Taiwan, and one is then called Taiwan Hinoki, and the other is beni. Beni is which is means red, Hinoki, but they don't call it beni Hinoki or Tai Hinoki. They call it Tai Hi and beni Hi. That's just abbreviation. So the Tai Hi and the beni Hi, and this is instead of Hinoki. Another word is then also the word chibi. Okay, Hinoki, again from the Hinoki, but Hinoki from a local area, compared to the Bishu Hinoki. The Bishu Hinoki is the most, it's a very highly appreciated Hinoki in Japan. One area, it is in the Kiso area. And then Kiso Hinoki is a very appreciated wood. It is a very nice white grain. It has a very nice properties. So then compared to this Kiso Hinoki or Bishu Hinoki, they have the local Hinoki from any area in Japan, and Ji means the earth, Ji, and they call it Ji Hinoki or short Jibi. Ji-hi, but it's pronounced Jibi. So nobody knows what Jibi means, but it is the local Hinoki. For example, in the Nara area, you find a Hinoki, and it's then Jibi. The Jibi is the very local Hinoki, and the tree rings are a bit rougher than this famous Kiso Hinoki, but it is also very much appreciated. It's called Jibi. Then, for example, Sugi. You have heard of Sugi, Japanese cedar.
Oh, cedar.
Cedar,
okay.
Yes. It's in Chinese. It's shanmu.
Yes.
Shanmu, or ribbon liu shan. And this has, in each area, it has a different. It has this area-related prefix, like in the north you have Akita Sugi. In Akita Prefecture, it's Akita Sugi. In the very south, in Yakushima, it's Yakusugi. The same Akita Sugi is also this.
In the back.
No, the same, just the page before. This is also this regular grain of Akita Sugi, Akita Prefecture cedar. It is very regular, but then this is in the north, and then in the south you have Yakushima and the Yakushima Island. This is from Yakushima Island, Sea, which is the very south. It's an island south of Kyushu. And the grain is very vivid, but I mean the trees are also very old, maybe over 1,000 years old. But this is a completely different climate, so the grain looks completely different. So this tree, this Japanese cedar, the Sugi, is very sensitive to the climate and to the soil. Okay. So the grain looks different, the color is different, and so if you say Yakusugi, so for example, they are making ceiling panels, or they made. I mean, they made this. You don't get it easily anymore. Ceiling panels out of Yakusugi is very vivid, and then out of Akita Sugi is very calm, very quiet. So you have different expressions. Expressions of the wood according to the tree species. But so you say Akita Sugi, Yakusugi from Yakushima, or Kirishima Sugi is also in southern Kyushu, or Nikko Sugi is near Nikko area. So you have different kinds. They have, of course, they have it in their mind, but what they use art-related books to get inspired or to get inspiration. For example, yeah, I visited them with the interviews, and they have all a library with important art-related books where they get inspiration from. For example, from the Shosoin, is an important source of inspiration. Yes. For example, this Japanese cedar from Yakushima Island.
Yes.
This is protected. They're 1,000 years old or older, and they're protected. I think this is even by UNESCO is a protected area, and trees are not allowed to be cut down. But they're typhoon in Japan, and so sometimes the typhoon it struck one tree, and then they used of this, then can use the wood. Another example is the Hinoki cypress, which I told you. So that was, I think, 20 years ago. It was possible to get the timber from Taiwan, which is not possible anymore. Taiwan is forbidden. There are no more enough timber, or they just don't want it to be taken. So the Japanese, they have, of course, a problem of supply, but in the case of the Heijo Palace, they did a reconstruction of this Heijo Palace. So they used timber, they used smaller trees, and they assembled trees to make large pillars. But of course this doesn't look so nice, and it easily cracks because they don't take the time. They didn't have the time to dry it, to season it properly. So there are some cracks in it, but they do it, and in that way they try to overcome this timber supply. But there's another temple which is reconstructed, the Kofukuji in Nara. One building is reconstructed, the Kondo Hall, and they get timber from Africa, Afzelia, and they call it Africa Keiyaki. So Keiyaki is another timber from Japan, but also due to the lack of enough large timber trees, they get it from Africa. You know about the reconstruction of the Ise shrine?
No.
Every 20 years, the entire shrine is reconstructed. This is an old tradition, and they continue this tradition. And they always plant the Hinoki trees for future temples, so for future shrines. Okay, if there's enough, it's extremely expensive, these trees. There is some timber, but extremely expensive. Yes, this is again Hinoki cypress.
Yes.
And especially this Bishu Hinoki or Kiso Hinoki from the Kiso area, which is near Nagano, Gifu Nagano prefecture. And this wood is used, but also they use sometimes camphor wood, which is the wood species used for the very first sculptures when Buddhism was introduced to Japan in 530. From that time on until the 8th, 9th century, they used camphor wood. Then from that time on, they used Hinoki cypress and Japanese nutmeg, Torreya nucifera. This is the same, this is a tree species they used also for the 9th, 10th century Buddhist sculpture. And the craftsman I was interviewing, Mr. Eri Koke, he uses the traditional tree species for the Buddhist sculpture. I would, okay, you can, so it's difficult to say. Maybe the wood objects of the tea ceremony.
Tea ceremony.
Yeah, they are very sophisticated wooden objects, and the craftsmen, they can really express their artistic ideas to make these objects, and also the objects of daily life.
Mm-hmm.
For example, this rice container,
Yes.
which is made from Japanese cedar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is just the cover. Yeah, but and then of course for architectural buildings, then they also have traditional wood species. They use traditional wood species. In my interviews, I was asking if they have some religious religious thinking towards the wood, if they do some prayers, and some people, some have and some don't have. So, for example, one does sutra prayers. For trees when he's cutting the tree himself, and also the Eri Koke, who makes these Buddhist sculptures. Every morning he makes also some prayers.
Okay.
Some people do prayers, or if they make buildings, or for example the carpenters who make any building, or temple buildings, or tea house, they make ceremonies, the groundbreaking ceremony. Mm-hmm. Then when the roof is completed, they have also ceremony. They always have some symbolic, so there's maybe some, it's a refer to some symbolic meaning.
I see.
Yes. For example, you see this frog?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Is a frog on a wisteria pot?
Yeah.
And which means, frog means Kyoto, this pot means Fuji, also the wisteria is Fuji. So Fuji, on the Fuji ni Kyoto, which means there's a frog on the pot, but this also is the same sound like Fuji ni Kyoto, which means safe return.
Oh, safe
yes,
return.
yes. So therefore I used it also here at the end of the book, with everybody's safe ending.